Good morning, Jubilee.
Good morning.
It's great to see you back. And I was with my family in California last week, and we had a wonderful time. I was there to see my sister, who lives in the Bay Area. And when I got back, some of you are like, you got so brown, you got darker. Somebody said you look more Indian. I don't know what I look otherwise. But anyway, it was good to be back and be refreshed. All right, if you have your Bibles, please turn to Mark chapter 8. We are continuing our series through the Gospel of Mark. And if you're especially new here, we go through verse to verse, verse by verse in the Bible, and it's a great way to study the Bible. The main theme, today's a long passage, and the main theme in our long passage today is this dynamic of spiritual blindness. Spiritual blindness. God has given us, so to say, two systems of vision. Right? First, we have the eyes to see physical things, but God has also given us spiritual eyes, and it's called the eyes of the heart, to see and perceive spiritual things. But one of the effects of sin, we all are sinful, we all fallen, is it blinds us. We are not able to see and perceive things of God or spiritual things. And we are so fundamentally blind that we are blind to our own blindness. We are blind, but we don't even realize that we are blind. I was doing a research for this sermon, and I found out there's actually a syndrome called Anton syndrome, A-N-T-O-N syndrome, which is caused by brain damage. And this syndrome is found among the blind people who are completely blind. They cannot see, right? Completely blind, but they adamantly believe that they can see. So it's a syndrome. And for all evidence shows that they cannot see. And if you put a pen before them and they say it's a spoon, but you cannot convince them that it's not a spoon. So it's one of the syndromes. And when I was reading that, it's such a description of us. Right? Because apart from God, sin blinds us, and the worst thing is we don't even realize. We think we can see, we know the way things are. Right? And that's how in the world it's so upside down. I mean, it always boggles my mind that same people who fight for abortion fight for animal rights. I mean, I'm not against animal cruelty or anything. But the same people who would go and protest are so, strong about, that's like, they see it, but it's completely blind. What seems right seems wrong, what seems wrong seems right. What we should laugh about, they cry about. What we should cry about, we laugh about. And so, it's blind is bad enough, but it's worse to be blind and not even realize that we are blind and see that we are smart enough. We know how things are. So in our passage, we see two groups of people who represent two different kinds of blindness. We'll see the Pharisees, who think they can see, but they refuse, they do not perceive Jesus. They rejected Jesus. They see clear evidence that he's from God. They're seeing all the miracles, seeing all the things. They're hearing his teaching, but yet they do not believe him. But we also see the disciples, who are also blind in many ways. They see the works of God, but yet they keep forgetting, as we'll see. It's a blind, but they are not willfully blind. Okay? They see, but they do not perceive everything. Okay? So let's look at our passage. Mark chapter 8, starting in verse 1. In those days, when again a great crowd had gathered, and they had nothing to eat, he called his disciples to him, and he said to them, I have compassion on the crowd, because they have been with me now 3 days, and have nothing to eat. Can you imagine that you're so passionate about listening to Jesus? And these are Gentiles. These are not even the Jewish people. These are Gentiles, and they've been listening to the Word of God for 3 days without eating. Right? Some of us like, why does he preach so long? It delays about lunchtime, right? These people are here, these Gentiles are there, 3 days listening, to Jesus teach. And Jesus has compassion on them. Because he's like, they've been listening to me for 3 days, and they have nothing to eat. Verse 3. And if I send them away hungry to their homes, they will faint on the way. And some of them have come from far away. And his disciples answered him, how can one feed these people with bread here in this desolate place? And he asked them, how many loaves do you have? They said, 7. And he directed the crowd to sit down on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves, and having given thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples, so set before people. And they set them before the crowd. And they had few small fish, and having blessed them, and he set them before the crowd, and they had a few small fish, and having blessed them, he said that these also should be set before them. And they ate and were satisfied. And they took up the broken pieces left over, 7 baskets full. And there were about 4,000 people, and he sent them away, and immediately he got into the boat with his disciples and went to the districts of Dalmanutha. Now, several weeks ago, we looked at Mark chapter 6, when Jesus fed how many people? 5,000 people, right? And we know there were women and children, so more than 25,000 people. Now, this is different from that feeding. Okay? We know that because that was 5,000, this is 4,000. That was, how many baskets were left over before? 12 baskets. And here, how many baskets are left over? 7. Right? And this is not even in the same region. That was in the Jewish region. And we talked about 2 weeks ago, Jesus is in the Gentile region of Tyre and Sidon. So the location is different, numbers are different. This is not the same miracle that Mark is repeating. But many liberal scholars who don't believe in the authority of the scripture, don't believe that it's written by God, insist or argue that this is the same miracle as before, and Mark is just rewriting it in a different way. They're saying, it's the same miracles, it's exactly the same thing. Mark just changed some numbers and some people, and he's repeating the same story. And the main reason they argue it's hard for them to believe is the second miracle that looks similar, is because they can't believe these same disciples who saw Jesus feed, how many, maybe 20 to 25,000 people, just a couple months later, are totally clueless. Same people who saw all these great miracles do. And so the liberal scholars say, it can't be. I mean, how can they forget in a couple of months? They saw it. But my point, but the crazy thing, what they don't understand, that's the very point of the passage. This is what Mark is trying to explain to us. Right? In verse 2, Jesus said, hey, I have compassion on these people. They've been listening to me for 3 days. We need to feed them. And you would think by this time they go, yes, Jesus, we are ready. All right, let's bring out some, we have 7 loaves. Let's bring out, you pray over it, and we are ready to serve some hot breads here. All right, we are all ready, Lord Jesus. Let's pray, let's get started. That's what you would think, right? After seeing something like that just happened a couple of months ago, listen to their response in verse 4. And his disciples answered, how can one feed these people with bread here in this desolate place? And you think, what? Disciples, are you guys kidding? Don't you remember what Jesus did? That he took the little lunch of 5 loaves and 2 fish and fed so many people? You would think after seeing all those miracles, they would believe, they would learn, they would know who Jesus is. Because part of the reason Jesus did those miracles was not just for the people, for his own disciples to realize, to know who he was. Hey, this is who I am. Look at the miracles. This is my character, compassion. You can trust me when you're in a difficult situation. But they face the same situation, and they're freaking out. How can we get bread? Send them away. Same thing as before. We know the rest of the story. Jesus takes the 7 bread and feeds all these 4,000 people and probably 20,000 people there. Now, after seeing the second miracle, what would you think? Okay, first time, a couple months ago, we missed it. Second time, all right, you saw a miracle, you were right there, you saw saw Jesus take and multiply. Now you would go disciples go, yes, Lord. Next time when we are hungry, when we don't have food, when you don't have any money, we can trust you that you are God. You are Jesus. We've seen you provide, and you will provide. Is that their response? Skip over to verse 14. We'll come back to verse 11 and talk about Pharisees. Look at verse 14. Now they had forgotten to what? To bring bread. And they had only one loaf with them in the boat. Verse 15. And he cautioned them, saying, watch out, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of the bread, leaven of Herod. And they began discussing with one another the fact that they had no bread. 17. And Jesus, aware of this, said to them, why are you discussing the fact that you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? Having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000? How many baskets full of broken pieces did you take up? They said to him, 12. Verse 20. And the seven for the 4,000. How many baskets full of broken pieces did you take? And they said to him, 7. And he said to them, do you not yet understand? So what's going on here? So they're on a boat, right? After this mission trip, they're going over to somewhere else, and they're in the boat, and they realize that they're on the journey. By lunchtime, they're hungry. And they realize that they have only one loaf for everybody. And probably Judas remembered to bring the bread. And he's like, I'm not sharing with anybody. I'm hungry and this is mine. And everybody's like, nobody brought food for everybody here? And we have this hour-long journey we have to row? We're going to die. We're going to starve. And it says they were arguing. That's in the Greek. They were squabbling. You're talking about, how did you forget it? Thomas, it was your responsibility. And Judas, you should not just have brought one, you should have brought for everybody. And they're freaking out and they're squabbling because they have only one loaf of bread. Right after they experienced the miracle. But my friends, look at the patience of Jesus. He goes, boys, what are you guys fighting about? What are you squabbling over? We have one loaf of bread. Don't you remember just a few months ago? With 5 loaves and 2 fish, I fed 25,000 people. And everybody was satisfied. And how much did you have left over? They said 12 baskets. All right, do you remember that? Yes, of course, Jesus, we remember that. Then do you remember just a few days ago? We just left that place. There were 4,000 people. They were hungry for 3 days. They were starving. And there were only 7 loaves of bread. And what did I do? It's like, yes, you prayed, and you fed this 4,000, 10,000, 20,000 people. And how much did you have left over? They said 7 baskets. And Jesus went, you still don't trust me? You've been seeing all those miracles one after another, how I provided for you, that I'm compassionate, I'm good, I care for you, not just for your spiritual needs, but your physical needs. And then over and over again, when you were in this situation, you saw who I am. Why do you not trust? How can you be so blind? And the language here is much gentle than what it looks. It's basically Jesus saying, do I need to do more? Do you need to see, how come you don't see it? My brothers and sisters, we can look at the disciples and go, oh my goodness, they're so blind. They're so dumb. They're so spiritually dumb. How can you do that? And yet, if you're honest, we can look into our own lives and see God's faithfulness over and over again in our lives and still worry and still stress out and still freak out when we face different situations instead of trusting Him. Don't we?
Amen.
We do. I look at my own life. God has been faithful over and over again. And I look back and say, why do I get stressed out when I know God has been faithful? If God has been faithful in the past, will He not be faithful in the present? He's the same God. The best way to look at your present is to look at your past. Has God been faithful to you in the past? And if He has been, will He not in the present? It reminds us of the Israelites who saw over and over again God do miraculous things. God provide bread from heaven. God provide food. God opened the Red Sea, everything. And yet what happened? Over and over and over again. I remember that when we were studying through the book of Exodus. And you're like, guys, what are you thinking? You are complaining and grumbling and trying to stone Moses when God has been so faithful to you? Because we have, even as believers, we could be spiritually blind. Or we can have spiritual amnesia. We see the things of God and we forget it. And that's why, my brothers and sisters, over and over in the Bible, God says, remember, remember. Right? That's why we do the Lord's Supper, communion, to remember. Because why? We forget. We see and do not remember what God has done. Is that true about you, my brothers and sisters? Some of you are so worried right now. You see a dark future, or you're worried about your job, or your children, or things. My question to you is, has God been faithful to you in the past? Has He? Has He failed you? Now, there may be certain things you may not understand. But my brothers, we all can look and say, God has been good and faithful. He has provided. And if He has done, why would we not do that again? It's just a reminder. So it's not just the disciples. But when you look at the disciples, it almost makes you feel good about yourself, right? Because we all can relate. Like, these are God's chosen disciples. And yet, they keep forgetting. But my brothers and sisters, just a reminder for us that we can be so spiritually blind, to see things of God, and yet forget it. And that's why, the reason God did that with the Israelites over and over again, God told them in Deuteronomy, hey, I let you go hungry, and then I provided for you so you can make this connection. Hey, I needed, I was in distress, I needed, I was hungry, and then God provided. So you would relate that, yes, this happened, I allowed this in your life. It was on purpose. It was not that, I forgot that this route didn't have food. I took you to the route, so what? So do you make a connection that what? Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word of God, by the promises of God. That you can trust me. And my brothers, that's how God does. Everything in our life, every single thing in our life is not an accident. It's not an accident. I know some other things are going through, it doesn't make sense to us. Nothing in your life is an accident if you're a child of God. And during those moments of stress, I think God wants you to look to Him and not freak out. And trust Him. The disciples, we can say here, are partially blind. They see enough to leave everything and follow Jesus. But yet, they don't see completely who He is. They don't completely get it. But the next we're going to see the Pharisees. Okay, you see a contrast here. The disciples are blind, but they see. They're not complete. They're partially blind. They see, but they don't see completely. And that's for many of us that we'll talk about later. But you see the Pharisees, they see, they have this Anton syndrome. They cannot see anything, but they are very confident that they can see. And they can judge. And they think they can even judge Jesus. Look at verse 11. The Pharisees came and began to argue with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven to what? To test him. And he sighed deeply in his spirit. If Jesus goes, that's bad. Okay. Seeking a sign from heaven to test him, verse 12. And he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, why does this generation, talking about the Pharisees, seek a sign? Truly I say to you, no sign will be given to this generation. And he left them, got into the boat again, and he went to the other side. The Pharisees come and demand a sign from Jesus. There's like, we don't believe that you're a Messiah. Prove it to me that you are. Now, these are the same people, like the disciples, who saw all the miracles. They saw the feeding of the 5,000. They saw the feeding of the 4,000. They saw Jesus heal the deaf and the blind. They saw Jesus cast out demons, and they see it. What did they do before? They said, yes, we see the power, but we don't believe that power is from God. We believe the power is from what? The whatever, Beelzebub, right? From the demon. So even when for either way it won't work. They see the power, they see the same things, and yet they don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah. And so they come to him, and they say, you need to give us more signs. Show us that you're Messiah. Prove it to us. What we have seen is not proof enough. My brother said, notice here what they're doing here. They are blaming Jesus for their unbelief. Do you see that? They're not blaming themselves, and they don't have an attitude to learn. They come here to test. Their heart is not, hey, we see these miracles, let's be open and see if he is the Messiah. No, they've already made up their mind about Jesus, that he's not. They're there to discredit him. They're there to test him. And they're blaming their unbelief on what? On God, on Jesus. And they're saying, we don't believe that you're a Messiah because you have not given me enough proof. So give us more proof. But my brothers and sisters, the problem was not the lack of proof. They witnessed the same miracles. The problem was that they were blind. And the problem was they had a grid. And they expected Jesus to be a certain way, from their own understanding, who would come and conquer and kick out the Romans and take over the government. And they would be the powerful people. They had this grid about what Jesus should look like, what God should look like, or what Messiah should look like. And when that didn't fit their grid that they came up with, they go, oh, no, you're not the Messiah. You're not who you say you are. My brother says this happens all the time. Some of us, if you're not a Christian, you reject Jesus because you have a certain understanding of what Jesus should be like. You reject God because you have an understanding, a preconceived idea of your own imagination. You have a God of your own making that you have a grid and you try to fit. Hey, does Jesus fit this? I don't know. If it doesn't fit, I reject him. So you don't come to see Jesus and learn from Jesus to see, hey, let me be open to see who God is. Because I may not know. I may be blind. I do not know. I am blind, and we are blind. But we come before God, and if God does things that is different what we think he should do, when God acts in such a way, when God's characteristics look a little different when we think, we reject him. A lot of people, my brothers and sisters, a lot of Americans, a lot of people in the world, reject God because they have the God of their own imagination, and Jesus does not fit into that. And some of you keep rejecting Jesus because your idea of who God should be doesn't match who God of the Bible is, who Jesus is, and you reject him. Rather than coming before him and humbly coming before him. My brothers and sisters, we don't define God. God defines who he is. God tells us who he is. And the scripture tells us who God is because this is God's word. So that's the problem with Pharisees. It's not that they don't have the evidence. They have the evidence. They see the same thing with the disciples. They see the same thing with the crowd. And yet, they reject him. And their attitude is what? They're there to argue with him. They're there to test him. They're not sincere seekers. If you come before God and you're sincerely seeking, because signs are not always a bad thing. Moses did, right? And God, he said, God, when I go, how do they know that you're from? And he said, God said, I'll give you a sign. So I don't think the sign itself was a problem. Is their heart, is their attitude. They came before God with that arrogant, prideful, rebellious heart. And how does Jesus respond to them? I'm not giving you any signs. I'm not. Your sign is me. Your sign is that I am. You see me. And you see the works of God. You know, there are people who tell me, hey, if this is my husband and my wife, or this person that I really want to know, if they saw the miracle, if they saw this healing in their life, then they would become a Christian. Then they would have a proof that there's God. You know, now God can use that, but I've seen over and over again personally, and you see over and over again in the gospel, you can have all the miracles, you can see it, and yet they don't believe. Because the problem is, it's not the signs. The problem is, to see the signs, you have the eyes to see it. You get it? I mean, if you're driving or you're on the street, there might be all signs directing to the right place, but if you're blind, you can't see those signs. So the problem is not there's no signs, the problem is we don't have the eyes to see it. And some of us, we on purpose, like the Pharisees, intentionally close our eyes to the things of God. Some people's idea is, some people are shocked by this. Oh, I thought Jesus would go, yes, I'll give you whatever sign that you need so that you will come to me. That's some of us image of Jesus. Some of us think like we can stand arrogantly before God and say, hey, God, you prove yourself to me. And Jesus goes, yes, I'll do whatever. Please come to me. Please like me. I need a follower like you. That's some of our idea, right? Some of us bring things before God and say, if you do this for me, then I will believe you. If you heal me, if you do this, you listen to me first. And you do what I want you to do, and then I will believe in you. My brothers and sisters, God does not work that way. You'll be disappointed. Jesus is God, you are not. We are not. And He's the Lord, and we are not. And we can't treat Him like a servant. We can't treat Him like He's a genie in a bottle. You listen to what I say, and then you got to follow, or I'll give you some money, or I'll let you come to Sunday to church. And so they reject Jesus, and it's a willful rejection. So you see a contrast here with the Pharisees. It's a willful rejection of Jesus. They see the sign, they choose not to. Say, they don't open their heart, their hearts are hardened. But you see the disciples. The disciples are also blind in many ways. Their eyes are open, they see Jesus, they realize that He's different, but yet they don't completely grasp. And they make mistakes along the way. They don't trust Him. But Jesus doesn't kick them out. Do you see His patience over and over and over again? He's patient with them. While Jesus walks away from the Pharisees and Simon walks away, He doesn't walk away with disciples and with seekers who are genuinely seeking God. If you're here, you are genuinely seeking God. That's the Spirit of God working in you. And God is not rejecting you just because we have doubts. This is not the same as having doubts. Some of us I'm not able to believe. God, please help me to see. God, this is not talking about that. This is talking about, I don't care. I've made up my mind about God. These Christians I hate. This is everything. I'm just going to do my way. That's what this is talking about. But if you're a genuine seeker, like the disciples, and you have doubts, you have moments that you're not sure, a genuine seeker, then God keeps working with the disciples. He keeps working, and He's patient with them till they see Him completely, and they will see Him. Right in the next passage that we'll see next week, Peter finally confessed, hey, you are the Messiah, you are the Lord. That's a huge thing, because this is the first time in the whole Gospel of Mark. And he will still not get it completely. It was only after he saw the death and the resurrection of Jesus that their eyes are completely open to see who Jesus is. And even as a Christian, some of you may have doubts. You may have certain things. God doesn't reject you. You can come before God, but we come before God humbly, with a heart to learn, with a heart to know God more. From verses 22 to 26, we read about the healing of a blind man. But this story is unusual, like the other healings that we saw, because most of the healing is just healing. It's a physical healing, and this is the same thing. But this is unusual because this is not just a healing, but most scholars believe, and as I was studying this is also a parable. Okay? It's illustrating something. Now, you probably heard some preachers, make spiritual meaning out of everything in the Bible, right? Those are not a good way to interpret the Bible. But here is a unique situation where something that's happened physically, okay, the blind man being healed, has a deeper spiritual meaning because the way it's placed. Okay, you see the blindness of the Pharisees, you see the blindness of especially the disciples. And Jesus is doing this healing before them to demonstrate what the disciples are experiencing. Right? So look at verse 22. And they came to Bethsaida, and some people brought to him a blind man and begged him to touch him. And he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. And when he had spit on his eyes and laid his hands on him, he asked him, "Do you see anything?" And he looked up and said, "I see people, but they look like trees walking." And then Jesus laid his hands on his eyes again, and he opened his eyes. His sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly, and he sent him to his home, saying, "Do not even enter the village." So some people bring their friend, blind man, to Jesus, and my brother said that's a wonderful thing to do. As a responsibility, we have is like we bring other people to Jesus who need to know Jesus, who need God in their lives. So their friends bring this blind man to Jesus. And what does Jesus do? Jesus spits and then touches his eyes. Can you imagine? After the service, I did the same thing. I'm for prayer. That changes your idea of Jesus, right? And then Jesus, throughout the gospel, Jesus never asked somebody, "Hey, are you healed? Can you see? Can you walk?" He just said, "Get up and walk," right? But here, Jesus asked him, "Do you see anything?" Okay. And this guy says what? "Yeah, I see men who are walking like trees." It's like ants in the Lord of the Rings, right? You remember the attack of the trees? But, all right, so these are like, he sees, but what's happening is like they see, he sees, but he sees men who are like trees. Basically what, it's not focused. Okay, he sees, but it's murky, it is blurry. He doesn't see anything. Now, what's happening here? Not only you see the compassion of Jesus in healing this blind man, you see the power of God. And we just take it just for granted. Oh yeah, he healed. But just imagine, somebody who can't see, never seen in his life, is able to see. But what is going on here? Now, this is a two-stage. The next stage we know, Jesus healed him again, touched him again, and then he's completely, he has a 20/20 vision, perfect vision. But this is the only two-stage miracle in the Bible. It almost looked in the first place that Jesus ran out of his power. All right, let's try one more time. It's like, first shot didn't work, let's do twice, all right? Double take. And finally it worked. There's a reason why Mark has placed us here at this place. And there's a reason why Jesus performed this two-stage miracle here, because it's also not only showing compassion, but it's also illustration. Because what Jesus is saying, sometimes, even as believers, sometimes you don't see everything at once. You see, and some of us are like that. You see Christ. You know, but you don't see everything. God needs to touch you again. Jesus, you need another touch from God. You need another touch from God's word to be able to see more. So that's what is happening here. They see it, and then the very next passage is what? Peter sees, and then their eyes are open more and more again. So I believe what he's teaching us, Jesus is teaching through that sometimes you don't see everything. And this has implications for us. This tells us that sometimes we need to be patient with each other. There are people in your life. They understand the gospel, they know that, and some of them, even they are believers. But then you look at them and say, I'm not sure whether they're a believer or not. They do profess Christ, and I see some signs that they're believers, but then certain times you go, huh? He or she does something or says something that looks that they're not Christian, right? And some of you feel that about yourself. You look at other people and say, are they Christians? Or they're not. Martin Lloyd-Jones, talking about this, talks about this man, you cannot say he's completely blind because he sees, but at the same time you can't say that he completely sees because he sees what? Men walking like trees. So it's almost like he's somewhere in between. And he talks about Christians who are Christians, they know they are believers. They know, they believe in justification, that, God saved them. But that's it. They don't have a full understanding of the gospel to see, hey, gospel is, Jesus is not just about being saved, but also walking with him, right? Some of us are like that. You know that you're saved. And you're thankful for the grace of God. But when it comes to your living, your desire for holiness, you lack that. Because you're still after worldly things. You still see, even as a believer, you still see worldly things looks better to you in some ways than Jesus himself. It's not that you deny Jesus, you know you're saved. And my brother and sister, what do you need? And what do this kind of people need? And there might be many of us here. Some of us here are completely blind. We reject Jesus. And my brother and sister, if you're somebody like that, don't harden your heart. Come to Jesus and say, God, open my eyes to see who you are. Jesus, I've heard about you. Open my eyes. I don't want to harden my heart. Come with a heart, not with an arrogant heart that you, Jesus, prove it to me and then you will get a follower. You come with a heart of humility before God. And there might be other people. You've seen, you're open to the things of God, but you've never taken that step. And what you need is to come before God and say, God, open my eyes to see fully who Jesus is. And some of you are believers here. But it's almost somewhere in the middle. I don't like to call it the middle because there's nothing in the middle. But it's like you see the gospel, you understand the gospel in some ways, enough to make you a believer, but that's it. There's no desire for growth in your life. There's no desire to be more like Christ. There's no desire to bring other people. You're like an earthly-minded Christian in many ways. You are a Christian because this person sees God has opened his eyes. And you know you're a believer. And some of us, you work on sanctification, you're really focused on growing, but it's like a work-based salvation. You know you're a Christian, but you're really trying hard to please God. And you don't completely understand the gospel that you are saved and you are accepted before Christ, that Christ loves you unconditionally. So you know that, but yet in your life, as we looked at before, and practically, it's more work-based Christianity. So whatever condition that you're in, my brothers and sisters, we all are blind in some way. Some of us are completely blind, like the Pharisees, reject God, and I pray that you will come to God. And my brothers, I urge with you to open your hearts to God. For those of you who are kind of on the fence, so to say, you're not a Christian yet, but you're open to the things of God. God has opened your eyes to see. You see there's truth in the scripture. You see there's truth that there's somebody who created the universe. You hear the gospel and there's a conviction, but you're not taking that step to surrender to him. And I pray that you will do that today. And there's some of you who are Christians. But other people look at you, and you look at yourself, like Martin Lloyd-Jones says, like, man, sometimes I act like a Christian, sometimes like, no. You know people like that? Like, sometimes they're Christian, sometimes you don't know where they are. Ask God to touch you, like the way Jesus touched this man. Jesus is going to touch you. The way Jesus opened the eyes of the disciples to see him more and more and more. So that these people will one day give their very life for Jesus. And my brother said for all of us. As we talk about the disciples, we can see the goodness of God, we can see the mercies of God, we can see the faithfulness of God, and yet worry, and yet live in stress. You know, I'm not going to ask the hands to be raised here, but if I did ask how many of you are really worried and stressed, that could be a lot of us. And you're a believer. And yet we don't trust God completely. Would you ask God, God, help me to trust you. Open my eyes to see who you are. And Lord, open my eyes to see all the inheritance that you have in store that we talked about Wednesday. So I will not be so focused when things don't go well in this world, but I have a great inheritance in you, Lord.